Note: the following story is approximately 11,000 words. The Vampire King's marriage proposal came during a city council meeting about zoning permits, and Sofia Zimmerman said no before he'd even finished his sentence. The fluorescent lights in the municipal building's conference room flickered as Alaric Nightshade stood from his seat at the far end of the table, his white hair catching the artificial glow like moonlight on snow. His pale skin seemed luminous against the expensive black suit he wore, and every human in the room went silent as he turned those ancient crimson eyes directly on her. Sofia had been presenting her argument about preserving the historic district when he had interrupted, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. She'd known who he was the moment he'd walked in 20 minutes earlier. Everyone in the city knew Alaric Nightshade, though most pretended the vampires didn't exist. They lived in the shadows, ran their businesses through human proxies, and the unspoken agreement was that humans didn't ask questions and vampires didn't make problems. "Miss Zimmerman," he'd said, his accent carrying hints of centuries she couldn't place, "I find myself quite taken with your passion for this city's preservation. I would like to propose a partnership of a more permanent nature. Marry me, and I will ensure your historic district remains untouched for the next 1,000 years." The other council members had gasped. Someone dropped a pen. The stenographer actually stopped typing. Sofia had looked at him for exactly 3 seconds, taking in his otherworldly beauty, his obvious power, the way reality seemed to bend slightly around him. Then she'd said, "No, thank you," and returned to her presentation as if he hadn't just upended every supernatural protocol anyone had ever heard of. She'd made it through another 2 minutes of her speech before the meeting was hastily adjourned. Now, standing in the parking lot beside her 10-year-old Honda, Sofia was beginning to wonder if she'd made a tactical error. Alaric Nightshade leaned against the car next to hers, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than her entire apartment building, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You said no," he observed, sounding genuinely puzzled. "I did." Sofia unlocked her car door but didn't open it. Her mother had raised her to be polite, even to immortal predators who'd just proposed marriage in the middle of a government meeting. "Was there something unclear about my answer?" "No one says no to me." "Well, I just did. So clearly someone does." She pulled the door open, but his hand caught it, holding it in place with effortless strength, not threatening, just present, undeniable. "Why?" he asked, and the genuine curiosity in his voice made her actually look at him instead of through him. Up close, he was even more unsettling. Beautiful in a way that human men simply weren't, all sharp, elegant lines and predatory grace. His eyes held centuries of knowledge, and she could see the slight points of his fangs when he spoke. Everything about him screamed danger, power, otherness. "Because I don't know you," Sofia said simply. "Because marriage isn't a business transaction, despite what you apparently think. Because I've spent the last 3 years fighting to save the buildings that make this city unique, and I'm not going to compromise that work by marrying someone who thinks he can buy me with promises of protection. I don't need a vampire king to save the historic district. I'll do it myself." She expected anger, maybe threats. Possibly worse, she knew what vampires were capable of, even if most humans preferred to pretend otherwise. Instead, Alaric Nightshade smiled. It was a real smile, not the polite social expression he'd worn in the council meeting. It lit up his entire face, made him look almost human except for those red eyes and 2 sharp teeth. "Extraordinary," he murmured and released her car door. "Absolutely extraordinary." Sofia got in her car and drove away, watching him in her rearview mirror until she turned the corner. He stood in the parking lot, still smiling, looking like a pale god in the middle of the mundane human world. She didn't realize until she was home that her hands were shaking. The flowers arrived the next morning. Not at her apartment, which would have been creepy and stalkerish, but at the small office she shared with 3 other preservationists in the converted warehouse downtown. 2 dozen white roses with black-tipped petals, arranged in a crystal vase that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The card said simply, "Dinner? A.N." Sofia's co-worker Martha practically swooned. "Do you know who these are from? Everyone's saying Alaric Nightshade proposed to you yesterday. Is it true? Did he really?" He did, and I said no. Sofia put the card in her desk drawer and tried to focus on the grant application she was writing. You said no? To the Vampire King? Sofia, are you insane? Probably, Sofia muttered, typing another sentence about the historical significance of the old brewery district. But I'm not going to marry someone just because he's powerful and rich and apparently interested in urban planning. He's also gorgeous, immortal, and could probably solve every problem you've ever had with a snap of his fingers. I don't want my problems solved by someone else's fingers, snapping or otherwise. I want to solve them myself. Martha shook her head, clearly thinking Sofia had lost her mind, and went back to her own desk. Sofia tried to work, but her eyes kept drifting to those impossible flowers. She didn't answer his dinner invitation. More flowers arrived the next day, and the day after that. Each arrangement more elaborate than the last, each card bearing simple questions or observations. What made you choose preservation work? I admire your dedication. Please reconsider dinner. I promise not to propose again without better preparation. That last one made her laugh despite herself. On the fourth day, he showed up in person. Sofia was doing a site survey of the old Meridian Theater, a beautiful Art Deco building that had been abandoned for 15 years. The owner wanted to tear it down and build condos. Sofia was trying to get it landmark status before that happened. She was alone in the dusty lobby, taking photographs of the ornate plasterwork when she felt the temperature drop. She turned and found Alaric Nightshade, standing in a shaft of fading sunlight that streamed through the broken windows. He stood carefully in the shadows just beyond its reach, wearing another expensive suit, his white hair pulled back at the nape of his neck. This is a beautiful building, he said, looking around with genuine appreciation. 1927, if I'm not mistaken. I was in Europe then, but I remember the photographs. Art Deco was humanity's attempt to capture the future in geometric form. You remember 1927? Sofia lowered her camera slowly. I remember much further back than that, Miss Zimmerman. I remember when this land was forest and river, before your city existed at all. He took a step forward, still careful to avoid the sunlight. I remember watching humanity build and destroy and rebuild over and over. But I don't remember the last time someone said no to me with such absolute conviction. It's refreshing. Is that why you keep sending flowers? Because I'm a novelty? I keep sending flowers because you interest me. Your passion interests me. Your pride interests me. He moved closer, a fluid motion that reminded her he wasn't human, would never be human. And yes, because you said no. Because you looked at everything I could offer you and found it insufficient. Do you understand how rare that is? Sofia set down her camera on the old ticket counter. Mr. Nightshade. Alaric, please. Alaric, I'm not trying to be coy or playing hard to get. I'm genuinely not interested in marrying you. I don't know you. You don't know me. Marriage isn't something you propose to a stranger in a city council meeting. Perhaps not in your world, he acknowledged, but in mine, marriages have been arranged for political advantage for millennia. I am the Vampire King of this region. I have territories to manage, alliances to maintain, power structures to balance. A human wife would be unprecedented. It would make a statement. I'm not a statement. I'm a person. I know. He said it so softly she almost didn't hear him. That's why I can't stop thinking about you. Sofia Zimmerman, 27 years old, graduate degree in historic preservation. Raised by a single mother who taught you to fight for what you believe in. You've saved 14 buildings in the last 3 years. You work 60-hour weeks for a salary that barely covers your rent. You could have gone into corporate architecture and made 3 times what you earn, but you chose this because you believe cities have souls, and those souls are worth preserving. Sofia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. You investigated me. Of course I did. You rejected the Vampire King. I needed to understand why. He took another step closer, and now they were only a few feet apart. She could see the exact shade of his eyes, crimson with flecks of darker red, like rubies held up to firelight. And what I found was someone remarkable. Someone who fights for things that matter, who doesn't compromise, who said no to me because your principles mean more than power or protection or wealth. How could I not be fascinated? "This is insane," Sofia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You don't fall for someone because they reject you. That's not how it works." "Isn't it?" Alaric smiled slightly. "I've lived for over 800 years, Sofia. I've been offered everything. I've been feared, respected, worshipped, hated. But I've rarely been dismissed. You looked at me and saw someone who didn't understand what matters. You were right. I didn't understand. I thought offering you power and protection would be enough. I thought like a king instead of like a man." "You're not a man. You're a vampire. I was a man once, long ago, before I was turned. And standing here with you, I remember what it felt like to want something I couldn't simply take or command." He held out his hand, palm up, an offering rather than a demand. "Have dinner with me, not as a king making a proposal, but as someone who would very much like to know you better. If you still want nothing to do with me afterward, I'll respect that. But give me one evening to prove I'm worth reconsidering." Sofia looked at his outstretched hand. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. He was a vampire, a predator, the king of creatures that drank blood and lived in the shadows and could kill her without effort. But he was also standing in the dusty lobby of an abandoned theater, talking about Art Deco and humanity's attempt to capture the future, respecting her enough to investigate who she was rather than just what she looked like. And there was something in his eyes, vulnerability, maybe, or hope that seemed impossible for an 800-year-old vampire king to feel. "One dinner," she heard herself say, "somewhere public, and you don't get to propose again." Agreed. His smile was brilliant, transforming his face from beautiful to breathtaking. "Tomorrow night, I know a restaurant that serves excellent food for you and can accommodate my dietary requirements." "Tomorrow night," Sofia agreed and shook his hand. His skin was cool but not cold, his grip gentle but undeniably strong. She felt something pass between them at the contact, some spark of recognition or possibility. Then he released her hand and stepped back, suddenly all elegant courtly manners again. "I'll send a car for you at 7, he said. "I'll drive myself, thanks. Just text me the address." He laughed, a genuine delighted sound. "Of course you will. Until tomorrow, Sofia Zimmerman." He was gone before she could blink, moving with that impossible vampire speed. One moment he stood before her, the next she was alone in the theater lobby with only the fading sunlight and dust motes for company. Sofia picked up her camera with shaking hands and tried to remember what she'd been photographing. She told herself, repeatedly, that this was just dinner. Just one evening with someone interesting. It didn't mean anything. It certainly didn't mean she was reconsidering his insane marriage proposal. But that night, alone in her apartment, she found herself looking through her closet for something nice to wear and wondering what you talked about with an 800-year-old vampire king over dinner. The restaurant was called Nocturne, tucked into a converted church in the historic district she'd fought to preserve. Sofia arrived deliberately 15 minutes late, driving her own car despite the sleek black Mercedes that had indeed appeared outside her apartment at 7. She'd texted Alaric that she preferred her own transportation, and he'd responded simply, "I expected nothing less." The host at the front desk, a pale young man who was definitely vampire, nodded when she gave her name and led her to a private room at the back of the restaurant. Through the stained glass windows, the city lights created patterns of color across the white tablecloth. Alaric stood when she entered, and Sofia felt her breath catch despite herself. He wore a deep burgundy shirt that made his white hair seem even more striking, and in the dim candlelight, he looked like something from a Gothic painting, beautiful and dangerous and utterly out of time. "You came," he said, and she heard genuine relief in his voice. "I said I would." Sofia took the seat across from him, accepting the menu from the host. "I keep my promises." "I'm learning that about you." They ordered an elaborate meal for her, a single glass of dark red wine for him that they both knew wasn't actually wine. Sofia had done her research on vampires the previous night. They needed blood to survive, though how much and how often varied by age and power. The older and stronger the vampire, the less they needed. A vampire king would need relatively little, but what he did consume would be potent. "Are you going to ask?" Alaric said after the waiter left. "Ask what?" "Where I get my blood. Whether I kill. All the questions humans want answers to but are afraid to voice." Sofia considered this. Do you kill? Not anymore, not for decades. I have willing donors, people who provide blood in exchange for payment or protection, or sometimes simply for the experience. He traced the rim of his glass with one finger. I won't lie to you, Sophia. I have killed. In my younger centuries, when I was more reckless, more convinced of my own superiority. I'm not a good man who happens to be a vampire. I'm a vampire who has lived long enough to understand why human life matters, even to creatures who exist outside its normal boundaries. That's surprisingly honest. You deserve honesty. If we are to know each other, even as friends, you should understand what I am. I am a predator by nature. I am dangerous. I've done terrible things in the name of power and survival and simple ancient hunger. But I am also capable of change, of growth, of choosing to be more than my nature demands. I am trying, every night I exist, to be worthy of the power I hold. Their food arrived, giving Sophia time to process this. She watched him watch her eat, his red eyes tracking every movement with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. Why did you really propose to me? She asked finally. The truth, not the political explanation. Alaric was quiet for a long moment. I saw you fight for those buildings, he said softly. I watched you face down developers and politicians and bureaucrats, never backing down, never compromising what you believed mattered. You were magnificent. And I thought, here's someone who understands what it means to protect something precious, someone who knows the value of history, of preservation, of fighting for things that endure, someone who might understand what it means to be immortal and watching everything you knew crumble away, over and over, century after century. He looked down at his untouched wine. I am surrounded by vampires who care only for power and humans who see me only as a monster or a meal ticket. But you saw me as someone who was interrupting your presentation and offering a simplistic solution to a complex problem. You saw me clearly without fear or greed, and you found me wanting. It was the first genuine interaction I've had in longer than I care to admit. Sophia set down her fork. So you do see me as a novelty? No, I see you as someone real. The novelty is being seen in return. The rest of dinner passed in easier conversation. Alaric asked about her preservation work, and his questions were insightful, informed by centuries of watching human architecture evolve. He told her about the city as it had been before skyscrapers, when it was just a trading post by the river. He made her laugh with stories about vampire politics, the bureaucracy that came with immortality, the absurdity of creatures who'd lived through the Black Death arguing about parking violations. We're not so different from humans, he said over dessert, a chocolate creation for her, nothing for him. We just have more time to hold grudges and make everything more dramatic. You're also immortal blood-drinking predators with supernatural powers, Sophia pointed out. Well, yes, there is that. He grinned and she saw his fangs clearly. Instead of being frightened, she found herself fascinated. Does it bother you? What I am? I'm sitting here having dinner with you, aren't I? That's not an answer. Sophia thought about it. It should bother me. Everything I know about vampires says I should be terrified. But you're right that we're not so different. You're just a person, albeit an immortal supernatural one, trying to do your best with the time you have. I can understand that. You are extraordinary, Alaric said quietly, with such intensity that Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm really not. I'm just someone who cares about old buildings and doesn't like being told what to do. That's what makes you extraordinary. You're genuinely yourself, without artifice or calculation. Do you have any idea how rare that is? The drive home should have been the end of the evening, but Alaric asked if he could walk with her from the parking garage to her apartment, and Sophia found herself agreeing. The night was cool and clear, the city alive with lights and late-night energy. I can feel you thinking, Alaric said as they walked. You're reconsidering your rejection. I'm considering that I enjoyed this evening more than I expected to, Sophia corrected. That's not the same as reconsidering a marriage proposal from someone I've known for less than a week. Fair enough. He stopped as they reached her building's entrance, staying carefully in the shadows cast by the streetlights. May I see you again? Are you asking me on a second date, Vampire King? I'm asking if I may spend more time with someone who makes me remember what it's like to be surprised. Call it what you wish. Sophia smiled despite herself. You may see me again. But slowly, Alaric. I don't move at vampire speed. I need time to understand this, to understand you, to figure out if what I'm feeling is real or just some kind of supernatural influence. I have all the time in the world, he said simply. And for the record, I have no powers that influence emotions or decisions. What you feel is entirely your own. Good. She hesitated, then made a decision. Standing on her toes, she kissed his cheek quickly. His skin was cool against her lips, smooth as marble. Thank you for dinner, and for being honest. She was inside before he could respond, her heart pounding like she'd run a marathon. From the lobby window, she saw him standing on the sidewalk, one hand touching his cheek where she'd kissed him, looking utterly stunned. Sofia went upstairs, grinning like an idiot. The next 2 weeks established a pattern. Alaric appeared at her office during the evenings, after the sun had set, always respectful of her work but clearly eager to see her. Sometimes they went out quiet dinners, walks through the historic district he seemed to genuinely love, once to an art gallery showing photographs of the city through the decades. Other times they simply talked while she worked. Alaric sprawled elegantly in her office chair, while Sofia sorted through grant applications or prepared presentations. He told her about vampire politics, the delicate balance of power that kept their society functioning. She explained the intricacies of historic preservation law, the constant battle between progress and preservation. You would be magnificent in vampire court, he said one evening, watching her rehearse an argument for the city council. You have exactly the right combination of diplomacy and absolute refusal to be intimidated. Are you still trying to recruit me? I'm simply observing that you possess political instincts that would serve you well in any arena. Though I'll admit, I quite like the idea of you by my side, decimating my opponents with well-researched arguments and that look you get when someone says something particularly stupid. Sofia threw a pencil at him. He caught it without looking, still smiling. She was falling for him. She knew it was probably crazy, definitely complicated, but undeniable. Alaric was brilliant and funny and surprisingly thoughtful. He remembered everything she told him, asked follow-up questions about projects she'd mentioned days ago, showed up with coffee in the mornings left on her office doorstep since he couldn't be there during daylight hours. He was also, she learned, incredibly protective. The developer, who'd been fighting her over the Meridian Theater, made the mistake of cornering Sofia in the parking garage one evening, trying to intimidate her into backing down from her landmark petition. He was standing too close, his voice aggressive, when Alaric simply materialized from the shadows. Step away from her, the Vampire King said quietly. There was something in his voice that made Sofia's breath catch. This was Alaric the Predator, Alaric the King, Alaric the ancient dangerous creature who could kill with his bare hands. The developer, who clearly didn't know who Alaric was, made the mistake of telling him to mind his own business. Alaric moved faster than Sofia could track, and suddenly the developer was pressed against a concrete pillar, held in place by one pale hand. Alaric didn't hurt him, didn't even seem to be trying, but the threat was absolutely clear. Sofia Zimmerman is under my protection, Alaric said, his voice carrying centuries of absolute authority. If you approach her again, if you threaten her in any way, if you so much as look at her wrong, I will know, and you will learn what it means to displease the Vampire King of this city. Do we understand each other? The developer nodded frantically. Alaric released him, and the man practically ran to his car. Sofia stood frozen, unsure whether to be angry about the intervention or touched by the protection. Alaric turned to her, and she saw his eyes had gone darker, more red, his fangs visible as he tried to calm himself. Are you all right? He asked, his voice rough. Did he hurt you? I'm fine. Alaric, you can't just threaten people who annoy me. He was threatening you. That's different. He took a breath, and she watched him visibly collect himself, the predator receding behind the courtly exterior. I apologize if I overstepped, but I will not stand by while someone frightens you. I wasn't frightened. I was annoyed. There's a difference. You were frightened, he said gently. I could hear your heartbeat spike. I could smell the adrenaline, and seeing you afraid made me want to tear him apart. He ran a hand through his white hair, looking suddenly uncertain. I'm trying very hard to give you space, to let you come to your own conclusions about us, but my nature is to protect what I care about, And Sofia, I care about you far more than is probably wise." Sofia's anger evaporated. She closed the distance between them, taking his hand. His skin was cool as always, his grip careful, like he was afraid of his own strength. "I appreciate the protection," she said, "but I need you to trust that I can handle most situations myself. If I actually need help, I'll ask for it. Deal?" "Deal." He squeezed her hand gently. "Though I reserve the right to intervene if someone truly threatens your safety." "That's fair, I suppose, given that you're an overprotective 800-year-old vampire king who's used to getting his own way." "You say that like it's a character flaw." She laughed and the tension broke. But walking to her car, her hand still in his, Sofia realized something important. She felt safe with him. Not because he could destroy anyone who threatened her, but because he saw her as someone worth protecting while still respecting her strength. It was a balance she hadn't expected from someone as powerful as Alaric. The following week, he invited her to his home. "I want you to see where I live," he said during one of their evening walks. "I want you to understand my world if you're going to consider being part of it." "I haven't agreed to be part of it," Sofia pointed out. "Not yet, but you haven't said you won't either." She couldn't argue with that. His home was beneath the city, accessible through a nondescript door in the basement of an old office building in the historic district. The door opened onto a staircase that descended far deeper than should have been possible, lit by electric lights designed to look like torches. "We've adapted to modernity," Alaric explained as they descended. "But we like to maintain certain aesthetics. Humans expect vampires to live in Gothic splendor, and we see no reason to disappoint." What lay beneath the city was breathtaking. A vast underground complex of chambers and corridors, carved from the bedrock and furnished like something from a European palace. Stone arches soared overhead, hung with crystal chandeliers. Tapestries centuries old covered the walls, and everywhere vampires moved through their nightly routines, pale and beautiful and utterly inhuman. They stared at Sofia as Alaric led her through the corridors, not threateningly but with intense curiosity. A human in their domain was clearly unusual. "They're not going to eat me, are they?" Sofia murmured. "Absolutely not. You're with me, which means you're untouchable. They're staring because you're the woman who said no to their king and lived to tell about it. You're already legendary down here." Oh, God! His private chambers were at the heart of the complex, behind doors of carved oak that probably predated the city above. Inside, Sofia found a space that perfectly balanced old and new, antique furniture and modern technology, oil paintings and flat-screen monitors, shelves of ancient books and a state-of-the-art sound system. "It's beautiful," she said, turning slowly to take it all in. "It's like stepping into history." "I've been collecting for a very long time." Alaric moved to a cabinet and poured her a glass of human wine this time. "Some of these pieces I've owned for centuries. Others I acquire because they speak to me of particular moments or people or eras worth remembering." He showed her his collection, and Sofia found herself fascinated. A Roman coin from the year he was born, a letter from a queen he'd once protected, photographs from the early days of the medium showing cities and people long gone. Each object had a story, and Alaric told them beautifully, his voice carrying weight of memory and loss. "This is the burden of immortality," he said quietly, holding a faded photograph of a young woman in Victorian dress. "Everyone I've known, everything I've loved from my mortal life, is gone. I collect these fragments to remember that I was once part of the world that dies and changes, that I'm not entirely separate from humanity, even if I no longer age as you do." "Is she?" Sofia gestured to the photograph. "Someone I cared for long ago. Before I understood that loving humans meant watching them age and die while I remained unchanged. I learned to keep my distance after that, to care for humanity in the abstract rather than individuals. Until now," Alaric set down the photograph and turned to face her fully. "Until you. Sofia, I know this is complicated. I know you have every reason to be cautious. I'm asking you to consider a life that would be extraordinary and difficult in equal measure. But I need you to understand something." He crossed to where she stood, taking both her hands in his. "I am falling in love with you. Perhaps I already have fallen. You are everything I didn't know I was searching for, brave and stubborn and brilliant and kind. You make me want to be more than I am. You make me remember what it's like to hope for something beyond mere existence. Sophia's heart hammered in her chest. Alaric, you don't have to say anything. I'm not proposing again. I promised I wouldn't. I just need you to know how I feel, what you mean to me, and that if you choose to walk away from this, from us, I will respect that decision. But I will also regret it for the rest of my very long life. She should have been overwhelmed, should have needed time to think, to process, to be sensible about something this huge and life-changing. But standing in his chambers beneath the city, surrounded by centuries of collected memories, Sofia realized she'd already made her decision. Probably made it that first night at dinner, or maybe even earlier, in the dusty theater when he'd talked about Art Deco and looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing in his 800 years. "I'm falling in love with you too," she said, and watched his eyes widen with hope and wonder. "I probably shouldn't be. This is insane and complicated and going to make my life infinitely more difficult. But I can't help it. You're brilliant and infuriating, and you care so deeply about everything despite having seen so much loss. You make me feel seen in a way I've never experienced before. So yes, I'm falling. I've probably already fallen." Alaric kissed her then, and it was nothing like Sofia had imagined. His lips were cool but gentle, his hands cradling her face with infinite care. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was the most important thing in his world, and when they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. Sofia Zimmerman," he whispered against her forehead. "You are going to completely destroy me, and I will thank you for it." She laughed, giddy and breathless, and kissed him again. They talked through the night, curled together on his impossibly comfortable couch, while Alaric told her more about vampire society, and Sofia asked 1,000 questions. She needed to understand what being with him would mean, not just emotionally, but practically. How would their relationship work when he couldn't go out in daylight? What would it mean to be associated with the Vampire King? Would she be in danger? "Some vampires will resent you," Alaric admitted. "They believe I should take a vampire mate, strengthen our bloodlines, maintain our separation from humanity, but they won't dare touch you, not while I live, and I have no intention of dying anytime soon." "What about during the day? You'll be asleep, vulnerable. What if someone tries to use me against you?" "My daytime security is extensive, and you're not helpless, Sofia. You're brilliant and capable, and if necessary, I will ensure you have the training and resources to protect yourself. But understand this, the moment you agree to be mine, truly mine, the entire vampire community will know that harming you means death. I will make that abundantly clear." "Yours," Sofia repeated. "That's very possessive, Vampire King." "I am possessive by nature. I told you I was trying to be better than my instincts, but I cannot deny them entirely. You would be mine and I would be yours, and our enemies would know better than to test those bonds." Something about the way he said it sent shivers down Sofia's spine. Not fear, anticipation, the promise of belonging to someone who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe while respecting her enough to let her remain herself. "I need time," she said finally. "Not to decide if I want to be with you, I do, but to understand fully what that means, to prepare for the changes it will bring. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Dawn was approaching when Alaric walked her back through the underground complex to the surface. The vampires they passed were returning to their chambers, seeking the darkness they needed for daylight sleep. Alaric himself was moving slower, his energy dimming as sunrise approached. At the door to the surface world, he kissed her one more time. "Be safe today," he murmured. "Think about what we discussed, and know that whatever you decide, you have made these weeks the most alive I've felt in centuries." Sofia emerged into the early morning light, the city waking around her, and realized her entire world had shifted overnight. She was in love with the Vampire King, and somehow, impossibly, he loved her too. The question now was what to do about it. The answer came faster than she expected, and not in the way she'd hoped. 3 nights later, Sofia was working late at the Meridian Theater, documenting details for the landmark application that would be heard the following week. She was alone in the building, or thought she was, when she heard footsteps in the lobby. "Alaric?" she called out, hoping he'd decided to surprise her. The woman who appeared in the doorway was not Alaric. She was vampire, though pale skin, red eyes, white blonde hair pulled back in an elegant knot. She wore a business suit that probably cost more than Sofia's car, and her smile was all predator. "Sofia Zimmerman," the woman said, her accent crisp and European. "How delightful to finally meet you. I am Morgana Vex, first counselor to King Alaric. We need to talk." Every instinct Sofia had screamed danger. She set down her camera slowly, keeping her movements non-threatening. "Does Alaric know you're here?" "Our king has been somewhat distracted lately. The council felt it necessary to address the situation directly." Morgana moved into the room with that liquid vampire grace, circling Sofia like a shark. "You've caused quite a disruption in our community. The Vampire King, besotted with a human preservationist. It's almost romantic, if it weren't so politically disastrous. I don't see how my relationship with Alaric is anyone's business but ours. Everything the king does is the council's business. He rules, but not without our support, and I'm afraid we cannot support this attachment of his." Morgana stopped circling, facing Sofia directly. "Vampires and humans don't mix, Miss Zimmerman. Not in any meaningful way. You'll age and die while he remains eternally young. You'll be a weakness he can't afford, a vulnerability his enemies will exploit. The kindest thing you could do is walk away now, before this goes any further." "Alaric can make his own decisions," Sofia said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "He doesn't need you to protect him from me." "Doesn't he? You rejected his marriage proposal, humiliated him in front of humans and vampires alike, and yet he continues to pursue you with an obsession that borders on madness. He's making himself look weak, Miss Zimmerman. Weak kings don't remain kings for long. If you're threatening him, I'm protecting him. From himself, if necessary. I've served Alaric for 300 years. I won't stand by and watch him destroy everything he's built for a human who will be dead in the blink of an immortal eye." Morgana's red eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. "So I'm giving you a choice. Walk away willingly, and I'll ensure you're protected, that your preservation work receives all the funding and support it needs. Or refuse, and I'll make your life so difficult you'll beg to leave. Every project will fail, every grant will be denied, every building you love will fall to developers. And there won't be a thing Alaric can do about it without looking like a king who's lost control of his own council." Sofia felt cold fury replace her fear. "You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you an opportunity to be sensible. Take it." Before Sofia could respond, the temperature in the room dropped even further. Alaric appeared in the doorway, moving so fast he was just a blur of motion. One moment he wasn't there, the next he stood between Sofia and Morgana, and the expression on his face was terrifying. "What?" he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Do you think you're doing, Morgana?" The first counselor didn't back down, though Sofia saw her tense. "Protecting your interests, my king, as I've always done. By threatening the woman I love? By coming here without my knowledge or permission to intimidate her? That's protecting me? She's making you weak. The whole court sees it. You moon over her like a lovesick youngling. You neglect your duties to spend time with a human. You're becoming a laughing stock, Alaric." "I don't care." He said it flatly. "Absolutely. Let them laugh. Let them question. Sofia is worth more to me than their respect or fear." "Then you're a fool." Morgana's composure cracked. "I've watched you rule for centuries. I've seen you navigate impossible politics, survive countless challenges, build something magnificent here, and I will not watch you throw it all away for a human who will be gone in 50 years. I won't." The pain in her voice was palpable, and Sofia suddenly understood. Morgana wasn't just protecting her king, she was protecting the vampire she'd served and loved for 300 years. Alaric seemed to realize it too. His anger drained away, replaced by something gentler. "Morgana," he said quietly, "you've been my most trusted advisor, my friend, through ages of darkness and difficulty. I know you care for me, but I cannot live for duty alone anymore. I've tried. For 800 years, I've put politics and power above everything else. And I was empty, Morgana, hollow, until Sofia looked at me and saw someone worth saying no to." He glanced back at Sofia, and the love in his eyes was unmistakable. She makes me remember what it's like to be alive, to want something beyond mere existence, to hope. I will not give that up, not for the council, not for political stability, not for anything. Then you'll lose everything, Morgana whispered. No, I'll finally have something worth keeping. He turned back to his first counselor. You will not threaten her again. You will not interfere with her work or her life in any way. Is that clear? And if I refuse? If the council refuses? Then I will remind them who is king, and why I've remained king for 800 years. There was steel in his voice now, ancient authority that made even Sofia take a step back. I have been patient with dissent. I've allowed debate and discussion because I value wisdom over tyranny. But this is not negotiable. Sofia is under my protection. Challenge that, and you challenge me directly. Are we understood? Morgana stared at him for a long moment, and Sofia saw the exact instant she gave up. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes dimmed, and she nodded once. Understood, my king. She was gone in a blur of motion, leaving Sofia and Alaric alone in the dusty theater. Alaric turned to Sofia immediately, his hands framing her face, his red eyes searching her for injury. Did she hurt you? Did she touch you? I'm fine. Alaric, I'm okay. She just talked. Sofia covered his hands with her own, grounding him. But this is what I was worried about. Your people, your world, they don't want me there. I don't care what they want. I want you. That's all that matters. Is it, Alaric, she's right about some things. I will age. I will die. You'll be left alone again. Maybe worse than before, because you'll have known what it's like to have me and lost it. And in the meantime, I'm a liability. People will use me against you. They'll see me as your weakness. You are not my weakness. You're my strength. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Yes, you'll age. Yes, we'll have less time than I'd wish. But Sofia, every moment with you is worth a century without you. Don't you understand? I've lived 800 years, and I never truly lived until I met you. But the council will adapt or be replaced. I am still king. I make the final decisions, and I choose you, Sofia. I will always choose you. She felt tears on her cheeks and realized she was crying. This is insane. We barely know each other. This is too fast, too intense, too everything. I know. And if you need to walk away from this, I'll understand. I'll hate it. But I'll understand. But please don't walk away because you're afraid of my world. Don't give Morgana that victory. If you're going to reject me, let it be because you truly don't want this, not because someone scared you into leaving. Sofia pulled back enough to look at him. His white hair was disheveled, his red eyes bright with emotion, his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. He looked like an ancient king and a desperate man all at once, and she realized something important. She didn't want to walk away. Not now, not ever. I'm not going anywhere, she said firmly. I love you, Alaric. I love you, and I'm not going to let anyone bully me out of being with you. But we need to address this. We need to figure out how to make this work politically, how to handle your council and your people and all the complications that come with being with you. We will. Together. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I promise you, Sofia. We'll figure this out together. They left the theater hand in hand, Alaric practically radiating protective fury as he escorted her to her car. He followed her home, waited while she parked, walked her to her apartment despite her protests that she was perfectly safe. At her door, he pulled her close one more time. I need to go deal with my council, he said quietly. Remind them of certain boundaries. But tomorrow night, come back to my chambers. I want you to meet the vampires who actually matter, the ones who will support us. I want you to see that not everyone in my world is like Morgana. Okay, Sofia agreed. But Alaric, be careful. She loves you in her way. That makes her dangerous. I know. But she'll learn to accept you, or she'll lose her position. Those are her only choices. He kissed her one last time, slow and sweet and full of promise. Sleep well, my love. Dream of me. Always do, Sofia admitted, and watched him disappear into the night. The next evening, Sofia descended into the Vampire King's domain wearing her best dress and every ounce of courage she possessed. Alaric met her at the entrance, dressed in full royal regalia. A black suit with silver threading, a cloak that somehow didn't look ridiculous, and a silver circlet in his white hair that marked him unmistakably as king. "You look magnificent," she told him, and he smiled. "You look like every dream I've ever had," he replied, offering his arm. "Ready to meet vampire high society?" "Absolutely not. Let's do this anyway." He laughed and led her deeper into the complex, to a great hall she hadn't seen before. It was enormous, the ceiling lost in shadows, crystal chandeliers casting pools of warm light across marble floors, and it was full of vampires, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all pale and beautiful, and watching Sofia with various expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Alaric led her to a raised platform at the far end of the hall, where two chairs sat like thrones. He took one and gestured for Sofia to take the other, a statement of equality that made several vampires gasp audibly. "My people," Alaric said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the enormous space. "I present to you Sofia Zimmerman, the woman who has captured my heart and my respect. She is human, yes, she is mortal, but she is also brave and brilliant and stubborn enough to say no to a vampire king, which shows better judgment than most of you possess." A ripple of surprised laughter ran through the crowd. "Some of you question my attachment to her. Some of you think it makes me weak. Let me be perfectly clear. Sofia is not my weakness. She is the first thing in 8 centuries that has made me remember why I fight, why I rule, why I bother existing at all. She will be treated with the respect due to a queen, whether she accepts that title or not. Any vampire who threatens her, intimidates her, or works against her in any way will answer directly to me. Is that understood?" The crowd murmured assent. But Sofia could feel the undercurrents of resentment and disapproval. Many of them were not happy about this. Then, a vampire stepped forward from the crowd, an older male with silver white hair and a kind face. He bowed to Alaric, then to Sofia. "My king, if I may, I would like to welcome Miss Zimmerman to our court. It has been too long since we've seen our king happy. If she brings him joy, then she is welcome in my house and my heart." Others began stepping forward, echoing the sentiment. Not all, not even most, but enough that Sofia felt some of her tension ease. There were vampires here who genuinely cared about Alaric's happiness, who were willing to give her a chance. The evening became a strange sort of reception, vampires approaching to introduce themselves and assess the human who'd won their king's heart. Sofia found herself discussing historic preservation with a vampire who'd watched the Gothic cathedrals being built, debating architectural theory with someone who'd known Frank Lloyd Wright personally, and explaining modern city planning to creatures who remembered when the city was just forest and river. They were strange and terrifying and oddly charming, these vampires. And slowly, gradually, Sofia began to feel less like an intruder and more like someone who might actually belong here. Morgana appeared near the end of the evening, approaching Sofia while Alaric was temporarily occupied with other council members. The first counselor looked tired, defeated in a way that made Sofia feel oddly sympathetic. "I owe you an apology," Morgana said stiffly. "I was out of line at the theater. I allowed my personal feelings to compromise my judgment." "You love him," Sofia said quietly. It wasn't a question. "For 300 years, not that it matters. He's never seen me as anything but a trusted advisor." Morgana smiled bitterly. "And now he looks at you the way I've always hoped he'd look at me. It's difficult. I'm sorry. Don't be. You won him fairly. You were yourself, unimpressed by his power, uncowed by his nature. That's what he needed, someone who saw him clearly. I was too blinded by my own feelings to ever be that person." Morgana met Sofia's eyes directly. "I still think this will end badly. I still think you'll break his heart when you die. But I also see that he's happier than he's been in centuries, so I'll support this even if I can't quite approve of it. That's all I'm asking for, support, not approval. Then you have it, and my word that I'll protect you as I protect him. You're part of his happiness now, which makes you part of my responsibility." It wasn't friendship, but it was a truce. Sofia took it gratefully. When Alaric finally reclaimed her from the crowd, he pulled her aside into a quiet corridor. "How are you holding up?" "Surprisingly well. Your people are not what I expected." They're impossible and dramatic and occasionally infuriating, but they're loyal, and they'll come to love you as I do. Given time." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "I'm sorry about Morgana. I didn't realize how she felt until last night. She'll be okay. We came to an understanding." "Of course you did. You're magnificent." He pulled her into his arms, just holding her in the shadowy corridor while vampire politics swirled around them. "Thank you for doing this, for trying to fit into my world. You've been trying to fit into mine since we met. It's only fair." Sofia looked up at him, this impossible beautiful creature who'd somehow fallen in love with her. "I've made my decision, by the way. About us." She felt him tense. "And I want this, all of it. You, your world. The complications and challenges and political nightmares. I want to be with you, Alaric. For however long we have, mortal or otherwise." "However long we have," he repeated slowly. "Sofia, what if I told you there was a way to extend that time, to give us centuries instead of decades?" Her heart skipped. "You mean turn me, make me vampire? Not now, not soon, but eventually, if you wanted it, if you were willing to give up daylight and mortality for an eternity with me." His voice was careful, uncertain in a way she rarely heard from him. "I know it's enormous. I know I'm asking you to consider giving up your humanity. But Sofia, the thought of losing you in 50 years, of watching you age and die while I remain unchanged, it's unbearable. I've done it before, with others I cared for, and I cannot imagine doing it with you." Sofia had known this conversation was coming eventually. She'd researched vampire turning, learned it was possible but difficult and dangerous. Not everyone survived the transformation, and it meant giving up sunlight, normal food, the human life she'd always known. But it also meant centuries with Alaric. Time to save every building in the city. Time to learn from vampires who'd witnessed history firsthand. Time to be part of something ancient and extraordinary. "Not yet," she said finally. "I want to live as human for a while longer. But someday, yes, Alaric, someday I'll let you turn me. When I've accomplished what I need to as a human, when I'm ready to step into your world fully. Ask me then." The hope and relief and love in his expression was almost painful to witness. "You mean it? You'd truly consider immortality?" "I'd consider anything if it meant more time with you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. "Marry me," Alaric said breathlessly. Not as a political statement, not as a business arrangement, but as a man asking the woman he loves to spend her life with him. "Marry me, Sofia." This proposal was nothing like the first one. This was Alaric vulnerable and hopeful, asking not demanding, offering his heart rather than his protection or power. "Yes," Sofia said, and watched joy transform his face. "Yes, I'll marry you. You impossible, wonderful, infuriating vampire king. Yes." The celebration that erupted when they returned to the great hall and announced their engagement was deafening. Even the vampires who'd been skeptical earlier seemed caught up in their king's happiness. Wine flowed, real wine for the humans, and donated blood for the vampires, and music filled the underground chamber, ancient instruments playing modern songs. Alaric danced with Sofia as dawn approached, holding her close while his people celebrated around them. "I should let you go," he murmured. "You need sleep, and I need to retreat before sunrise." "I don't want to leave." "Then stay. Sleep here in my chambers. Wake in the afternoon and let me spend the evening showing you how much I love you." It was a promise and an invitation. Sofia accepted both. The next few months were a whirlwind. Sofia continued her preservation work, but now with the full backing of vampire resources. Alaric quietly bought the building that housed the Meridian Theater and gifted it to the city as a protected landmark. Other projects she'd struggled to fund suddenly found mysterious donors. Developers who'd fought her backed down without explanation. "You're using vampire influence to help my work," she accused one evening. "I'm using my resources to support the woman I love," Alaric corrected. "Is that so terrible?" "It feels like cheating." "It's called having a partner with means. Get used to it." She threw a pillow at him. He caught it and used it to pull her into his arms, and the discussion ended there. Planning a wedding between a human and the vampire king turned out to be hilariously complicated. They needed a ceremony that could happen after sunset, but wouldn't run too late for Sofia's human friends and family. They needed a venue that could accommodate both species. They needed to navigate vampire politics about human-vampire unions, which apparently involved approximately 9,000 years of tradition and protocol. "Let's just elope," Sofia suggested after a particularly grueling meeting with the Vampire Council about ceremonial requirements. "Absolutely not. I've waited 800 years for this. I want everyone to witness me marrying the woman who said no to me and made me remember how to be happy." "You're impossible. You love me anyway." She did. God help her, she absolutely did. The wedding took place on a perfect autumn evening in the gardens of a historic mansion that Alaric owned because, of course, he owned a historic mansion. The ceremony blended human and vampire traditions, overseen by a vampire elder old enough to remember when marriage ceremonies involved actual blood oaths. "We've modernized somewhat," the elder assured Sofia's very nervous mother. Sofia wore a dress of deep red vampire tradition for a human bride and white roses in her dark hair. Alaric wore black velvet and silver, looking like something from a Gothic romance novel come to life. When he saw her walking down the aisle on her mother's arm, his expression made Sofia's eyes sting with tears. They spoke their vows under the stars, promising forever to each other, even knowing that forever might look different than they imagined. Alaric's voice shook when he promised to love her for all her days, and Sofia cried through her promise to stand beside him through whatever came. When the elder pronounced them married, Alaric kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning, and the assembled crowd of humans and vampires alike cheered. The reception was a strange, wonderful blend of both worlds. Sofia's college friends danced alongside centuries-old vampires. Her mother charmed Alaric's counsel with stories from Sofia's childhood. Even Morgana smiled, though it was bittersweet. "You chose well, my king," she said, toasting them at dinner. "May you have many happy years together." "Centuries," Alaric corrected gently. "Eventually." When the celebration finally wound down and the sun threatened the horizon, Alaric swept Sofia up in his arms and carried her to the master bedroom of the mansion, their home now, together. "Hello, wife," he murmured, setting her carefully on their bed. "Hello, husband." Sofia pulled him down beside her, running her fingers through his white hair. "How does it feel, being married to someone who turned down your first proposal?" "Like I'm the luckiest vampire who ever existed. Your pride, your certainty that you deserved better than a political arrangement, that's what made me fall for you. You demanded I see you as an equal, as someone worthy of respect and proper courtship. You taught me that being king means nothing if you're not being genuine. I just knew what I was worth. And I'm grateful every night that I learned to see it too." He kissed her softly, then deeper, and Sofia lost herself in the sensation of being loved by someone who'd waited centuries for her. The years that followed were extraordinary. Sofia continued her preservation work, becoming one of the most successful advocates in the city's history. With Alaric's support and resources, she saved dozens of buildings, created new historic districts, and revolutionized how the city thought about its past. Alaric ruled his vampire kingdom with renewed purpose, his connection to Sofia grounding him in ways he'd never experienced before. He was more patient with his council, more engaged with his people, and more connected to the human world he protected. They built a life together that spanned both worlds. Evenings spent in vampire court, handling supernatural politics. Days when Sofia worked while Alaric slept, leaving him notes about her day that he'd read when he woke. Weekends at the mansion, just the two of them, talking about everything and nothing. The question of turning came up occasionally, gently. Alaric never pushed, but Sofia knew it weighed on him. As she approached 30, then 35, she saw him watching her sometimes with a look of bittersweet longing. Soon, she promised on their 10th anniversary. "I've accomplished what I needed to as a human. The Preservation Foundation is established. The historic districts are protected. I'm ready, Alaric. I'm ready to join your world fully." The turning was planned carefully, done with centuries of vampire knowledge to ensure her survival. Sofia went into it unafraid, holding Alaric's hand, trusting him completely. The transformation was agony and ecstasy combined. 3 days of fever and pain as her body died and was reborn. And then she woke to a world transformed, colors brighter, sounds clearer, everything more vivid and intense than she'd ever imagined, and Alaric, her husband, her love, looking at her with such hope and joy and relief. "Welcome to immortality," he whispered, kissing her. "My brilliant, stubborn, magnificent wife." "How do I look?" Sofia asked, catching sight of herself in the mirror, pale skin, eyes that had shifted to red, every feature somehow sharper and more defined. "Like you've always belonged here. Like you were meant to be by my side forever." Forever. Sofia tested the word, feeling its weight and promise. No more counting the years they had left. No more watching Alaric worry about losing her. Just eternity stretching out before them, full of possibility. "What do we do first?" she asked. "Whatever you want. We have all the time in the world." They spent the first year teaching Sofia to navigate her new vampire nature, the hunger, the strength, the heightened senses. Alaric was patient and careful, helping her learn control. She made mistakes, nearly breaking doors, crushing glasses, once accidentally putting a dent in their car when she closed the trunk too hard. But she also reveled in her new abilities. She could move like Alaric now, that impossible vampire speed. She could see in perfect darkness. She could work through the night in vampire court and no longer needed to excuse herself when dawn approached. She was stronger, faster, more capable than she'd ever been. And she would have centuries to use those abilities to protect the city she loved. The preservation foundation she'd founded flourished under her immortal guidance. With infinite time and patience, she could outlast any developer, outmaneuver any politician. She became a legend in historic preservation circles, the mysterious benefactor who never aged and never gave up. Alaric's reign entered a new golden age, his queen by his side. Sofia brought a human perspective to vampire politics, challenging old assumptions and helping bridge the gap between the two species. She became as respected in vampire court as she was in human preservation circles. 20 years after her turning, on their 30th wedding anniversary, Sofia and Alaric stood on the balcony of their mansion, looking out over the city they'd both worked to preserve and protect. "Do you regret it?" Alaric asked quietly. "Giving up your human life for this?" Sofia considered the question seriously. She missed sunlight sometimes, missed the simple pleasure of a sunny afternoon. She missed aging alongside her human friends, though most had learned to accept her new nature. She missed being entirely human. But she had Alaric. She had purpose and love and time to accomplish everything she'd ever dreamed. She had been part of something ancient and extraordinary. "Not for a second," she said honestly. "You asked me to marry you, and I said yes because I loved you. But before that, I said no because I needed you to see me as an equal. And you did. You gave me the courtship and respect I deserved. You waited for me to be ready. You let me keep my pride and my independence even as I joined your world. Your pride is what made me fall in love with you," Alaric said, pulling her into his arms. "The way you stood in that council meeting and rejected me without fear. The way you demanded I be better than my first offer. You taught me that being worthy of love means being worthy of someone's pride in choosing you. And you taught me that love means being vulnerable enough to accept someone completely immortal, vampire king and all." They kissed as the city lights twinkled below them, two immortal beings who'd found something neither had expected: genuine partnership, respect, and love that would truly last forever. Morgana, visiting for the anniversary celebration, found them on the balcony and smiled. "You two are sickeningly happy. It's almost nauseating." "Jealous?" Sofia teased gently. "Absolutely, but also glad. He deserves this. You both do." She raised her glass blood-red wine that was actually wine this time. To the woman who said no and made a vampire king fall in love. To Sofia, queen of the night, protector of history, and the most stubborn human-turned-vampire I've ever met. "I'll drink to that," Alaric laughed, and they toasted together, past and present, human and vampire, pride and love all intertwined. The city below them was old and new, historic and modern, full of humans who didn't know they were protected by ancient powers. Sofia and Alaric would watch over it for centuries to come, preserving its soul and its stories. But tonight, On their anniversary, they simply held each other and remembered a city council meeting, a proposal, a proud woman who said no, and a vampire king who fell even harder for her pride. It had been the beginning of something extraordinary, and it would never, ever end.